this last video, we're going to match our highlights. So we have matched all of our shading, right? We've got a good range of 5 values. You're going to need your project, your photograph, some chalk. If you've got a chalk pencil, that's great. If not, just regular chalkboard chalk works. Fantastic. And an eraser. So pause the video now and go grab those materials. All right. So I'm going to start with lowlights, right? And those are halfway between the gray of the paper and the brightest white I can create with the chalk. I've tried using colored pencil in the past. The colored pencil just does not get as bright. The charcoal pencil, white charcoal pencil works pretty good. This does not erase as well, so if you get chalk on something you don't want, it's a little harder to take off, but it can be done. So I'm going to start with inside my face, and again, you can fold the photograph and hold it up against the paper and see it's one shade lighter than the gray of the paper currently is. And before I've done all this, and I think what I showed you at the end of the last video is that you go in and you clean out any area that's going to have chalk in it. Just to make sure that you don't have pencil flashing through. Double check one last time, make sure you don't have any grid showing that you don't want. And a lot of times I will actually spray it so that I don't smudge the pencil into it as I'm working. All right, so I'm going to start with the low lights. I'm going to work my way down just so I'm not smudging across what I already have. And I'm going to go in and just very lightly. I like to work in a circular motion just so we don't see streaks. Like pencil marks when you're, or scribble when you're shading. And I'm looking back and forth, right? This is much of an observation drawing as the shading and actually using the grid. And there are places I will go in and re-erase to let the gray of the paper do some of that work as well. All right, that area right in there, there's some brighter whites along the top of each of those creases in my forehead, so I want to show those. You also want to look for reflected light. If I've got reflection in glasses or in an eyeball, things like that, those little details are really going to add to that match. That we want our drawing to look as 3D as the photograph does, and that is having an accurate range of both highlights and shadows. Also, don't forget the whites of your eyes. A lot of times people forget that, and it'll make that area of the face look a little flat. So you notice I'm just moving my finger down the photo and finding those areas and working them in. And when you start getting into bright whites, like this stripe down my nose, it's very much like when we shaded or chalked the highlights into the spheres, right? You start with a heavy application and you lift the chalk and go lighter and lighter as you go. Now, as you get into highlights into your hair, if you have highlights in your hair, this is a good place to go back over and maybe retouch it with an eraser, because pencil showing up underneath the chalk will sometimes look blue. And I want to show that texture as I go. So I'm going to clean out some of those brighter areas. And I'm just using very light pencil strokes. All right, now that I've got everything highlighted in the face, this is probably when I would go prop it up, hold it up at an angle this way and step back from it and look at it from 3 or 4 feet away and just make sure I don't have anything too dark or too light going on before I move on to the bright whites. Now I have a second piece of chalk, there it is, somewhere, that's even bigger. If you're using this size chalk, a lot of times I will use the side of it just to cover bigger areas. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in between these lines here, because they are bright white. You will just continue to go through and match all your highlights and lowlights in the background as well. All right, I've got my highlights, my lowlights. I'm just going through at this point. I'm double checking. Make sure there's nothing I need to erase out or brighten up. I will tell you that when we spray this with Spray Fix, it does blow a little bit of the chalk off the paper. So I always tell students, try to go a half a shade brighter than you think you're gonna need, especially in low lights, so that they don't completely disappear. Putting a little bit of the hair texture back in there that got rubbed off while I was working on shading the background. Now, if you're doing this at home and you don't have any actual Spray Fix, cheap 99-cent Aquanet hairspray works great as a light mist to keep things from smudging or coming back off the paper. If not, you can use a workable Spray Fix to go in and fix some of that in place. So at this point, I usually wash my hands. I'll get my eraser back out one last time, make sure, like there's some places here where I've got some chalk on some pencil marks that look a little weird. Starting to look a little blue. And then you are done.